Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You Exchange, the podcast where I exchange my user experiences to change them, and yours for the better. I'm Jeremy, a mentor and senior user researcher with over 8 years of experience and a background in neuroscience. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of engaging with hundreds of users around the world. I've created this podcast with the aim of providing my mentorship and educational content, offering actionable tips, knowledge, and guidance in the realm of research to anyone having an interest in this area. And I hope that you will find this episode insightful. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Here we are today for this third episode of this series dedicated to note taking. And today I will focus specifically on the topic of interaction with note takers. So, in the case, if you are collaborating with someone who is taking notes for you, but you can also adapt that to the situations in which you are the note taker. And so in this case, you need to have this conversation with yourself. And it may not be as silly as it sounds, to be honest. So let's start. When you work with a note taker, like with anything involving collaboration, you need to make clear to your note taker what the research objectives are. So, what do you expect as outcome from this research? What are you looking for? You should also clarify the role and the implication of the note taker and communication protocols. So, for instance, I have been in some projects with people who were there as note takers. A good practice when you interview someone and you have someone in the back taking notes is allowing these people at any point in time, just at the very minimum, because they are here taking notes for you. So I think the very minimum to allow them is that they can go off mute and then they can ask questions to the participant as well, because as they are taking notes, that's the minimum that they should be able to do, because probably to help them in taking some notes, they might have to ask more questions to the participant, and it can also help you indirectly. So that is part of the communication protocols, is like mentioning to first your participant that you are with some people here on the call who will be here only to take notes, but at any moment in time they can also interact with them if they have some questions. But here, this is one way of doing it. I can tell you that I have been in some situations in which the roles were not clear. And so I had people, for instance, messaging me every 2 minutes, or I had people going off mute at any moment in time, and it's not expected. So that is very something that should be mentioned, even if they don't go off mute, but that they want to ask you questions. Just make clear that you may or not be able to see the question in the chat, for instance, because you have your attention dedicated to your participant. And after all, that's the reason why you're working with note takers in the first place. So this should be made clear so that the expectations are set. Then, what would be kind of, let's say, expected for both you and your participant, your note taker, it's to go through a dry run session. And this is valid in any case in user experience research. So it's always good to do some dry run. And this is also valid in other areas. So if you're going to interview someone, let's say on TV or whatever, it's also good to have a dry run of that. So just to make sure that your questions are clear, that the flow is good, that everything is good in terms of technology and tools, and that everyone is familiarized with the tools. So, for instance, if you're working with note takers, they might use some tools of yours that I mentioned in the previous episode, such as templates, such as guides, such as, let's say, documentation or anything they might need to have on their side when they are taking notes. And so they need to be familiarized with that. So that is the moment to do it in the dry run, but specifically for the tools, I would advise you to make them available as soon as possible to your note takers so that they have time to prepare. So they can, for instance, review the research plan, they can review the script. You can do a template walkthrough to explain to them, okay, here is where I expect you to take notes. If this is agreed between you both that the note taker will take notes in a template, tell them this is your space. And I'm saying that because I have been in situations in which I had several note takers, so it's good that you make one board or at least one dedicated space for each one of them. So as I said, do some practice sessions, do a walkthrough of the template, do some dry runs, at least to familiarize yourself and your note taker with the tools. And then in terms of preparing the research sessions, of course, even if you made the elements and the resources available to your note takers, it's always good to review together the research plan, to have a meeting to go over the research goals, to also go through the script. Something that can also help is, and that I did in the past that worked really great, was for me to run the interview to my note taker, but as a dry run, my note taker would be my participant so that they would be in the shoes of my participant. Bonus point if this note taker is a product manager, because they can feel how it feels to be interviewed, basically. So they would be on both sides of, let's say, the play. And also, it would be great to try to plan for any contingency that might happen. Let's say a shortage in internet connection or whatever. I'm forgetting a question, for instance, or the participant is not answering the way he or she should, and so on and so forth. Also, you need to brief your note taker, as much as possible. So, as you know, note takers have different levels of knowledge when it comes to being prepared in terms of UX research, and that can be applied in any field. If you're going to interview someone on a given topic, not necessarily in UX research, and you have someone taking notes, this person might need to be prepared when it comes to what is the most useful information to take note about, at least what is interesting you. But these people also may have some things that they might be interested in to take notes. And so, of course, it's a balance. It's a balance. And one of my pieces of advice would be to give freedom to your note taker to take the notes that they want to take, of course, but just mentioning what you are most interested in. So this is for preparing when it comes to the session and the note-taking part. And now I wanted to, let's say, dedicate some time to the debrief. The debrief is a very, very, very important part of any session about note-taking, any user session, and any note-taking activity. And this also applies to you if you're taking notes for yourself, basically. So imagine you're a student, you took some notes during the class, and this is so important because your memory, this thing that is so intangible to you at this very moment, will be totally, totally different 1 hour after, 5 hours after, and 1 day after, basically. So this is the most valuable asset you have at the moment when you ended the very thing you took notes about. And really, this is the most important thing, is to make use of that, because you have a superpower, which is you have a super tool, which is your brain, and you have a superpower, which is your short-term memory. Your short-term memory is limited. And so at the very moment when something ends, you remember about this directly. But when new things happen, you cannot hold all of these short-term memory elements you had before intact, basically. So I remember in my neuroscience classes, I was told that we could more or less, depending on the people, retain about 7 items into short-term memory. You can try that with anything. A phone number, for instance. It can also be the outline of a course, of a class, for instance. Try when you end a class, for instance, or a meeting, anything. Try to remember 7 things. It will oftentimes be hard. And on top of that, we should add the fact that there are some biases. We have cognitive biases. There is a whole list of cognitive biases. I highly encourage you to go to look up for them. And one of them that I really like, well, don't like actually, but I like to think about them, is the recency and the primacy bias, which mean that in any given lists, or let's say episode, or anything that happened to you that evolve through time, you will, a sequence, let's say, of events, you will more easily remember the first element that happened, for instance, what your teacher said in the first minutes of the class, and the last element. And then you will remember about some things in between that were particularly, let's say, striking in terms of importance. But you will usually remember less about the middle. But this is oftentimes the most important. So, well, the most important, at least it gives some depth to what you're trying to learn. And so, think about that. Think that you will more often than not remember the first things that you discussed with your participant and the last things. And you will oftentimes miss things in between. But however, even if that's the case, even that, the day after, for instance, or at least as soon as some events happen after your, let's say, your user session, imagine you go on a coffee break. As soon as some events happen, this is not the same. This is never going to be the same. So you should capitalize on that and take notes of whatever you remember after the session. And this is crucial. I cannot tell you how many times I missed important information because I hadn't taken notes right after the session. And this happened in many areas of my life. Again, that applies to many things. And I know right now we have AI and we have all these tools. I will cover them right now. But still, it's important for whatever area you want to learn about to make the work and to be dedicated to writing about that. It can be writing by hand. It can be writing on a laptop. I'm a huge believer that writing by hand allows you to remember better, but however, everyone has different, let's say, ways of working and preferences. In my case, it works better. So I would really encourage you to do that. And so why am I saying all that? It's because you're not the only one on the call at the time of the user interview. You also have people by your side taking notes. And these people also have memories. And these people also have biases. So you need to make sure that none of this information across everyone is getting lost. And so make sure that you have these debrief sessions. Usually the debrief sessions can happen in 10 to 15 minutes. And it can be as simple as, on one extreme of an axis, the simplest one is like just talking about what was interesting to you. It doesn't need to be something really new. It will not be new. It's just remembering. It's just sharing. Oh, you remember when the participant said that? Oh, I was really interested about knowing more. Oh, this was insightful, and so on and so forth. For those of you who follow soccer, for instance, we can all know about these moments after a game when we have I don't know how to say in English, the people who comment about what happened during the game. There is nothing new. There is nothing new. It's just commenting about what happened. But we can see the value in that because it allows us to let's say encapsulate this information better. So the simplest way is just having a phone call and just to say, okay, I remember about this, and you, what do you think about that, and so on. Another way is also to structure this information. You can have a board and write all of this information. And to be honest, for those of you who are familiar with the 20-80 rule, which states that 20% of your effort in general and of your activities will allow you to produce 80% of the output. Well, for me, this is one of the best examples because you're leveraging something. So you can work as hard as you want, but if you have no leverage, you will not go as far as if you had leverage. And here, the memory is your leverage. So use it. In my opinion, at least. We cannot every time. Sometimes we have a meeting right after, but we need to make space for that. That's my humble opinion. So that will help you to consolidate your notes, identify the gaps, check also the quality of your data because probably you took some notes about something, but your neighbor took notes about something else. So this is also good. And again, that applies if you're a student, for instance, and if you took note about something. Because after you can quality check what you took note about and you can think, oh, okay, in this moment of my notes, I'm lacking information. So this can also be a way for you to integrate better your information and to be more robust about your learning, basically. Then I wanted to cover a bit about the evolving trends when it comes to note taking. So, of course, I like to take notes by hand as much as possible. It allows me to integrate information, but I also understand that it's oftentimes not possible to do it live because we cannot dedicate fully to both activities. As I said in one of the previous episodes, we take 100% of our attention and we divide it basically. So if I do 3 tasks, it will be more or less 33% and so on and so forth. So, but we can see that it has value because you associate a motor activity, which is writing, to other activities such as listening or such as understanding what's happening around you. So there's that. And you also have the recorder, so you can leverage that because it's a no effort tool that will allow you to, let's say, gather the most of the information. However, as I said in previous episodes, be wary of this principle of the least amount of work you do right now will result in the highest amount of work you will do tomorrow. So if you rely only on your recorder, you will need to review all of the recording and take notes after. There is no other way, and to analyze. And this is the end of the spectrum of what I wanted to talk about today. We covered a lot note takers, so we'll not go through it. You already understood by now that there is high value in having note takers around you for your user research sessions. But we also have new transcription and automated tools. If you work at a company that authorizes that, of course, leverage that as much as possible because it will help you and allow you to be faster in ways we cannot imagine. So some tools such as user testing, for instance, allow you to allow you to run your user sessions, and then they will automatically have the transcript and sometimes even AI to categorize by themes. And to be one of the people who used it in the past, I can tell you this is amazing. This is amazing. However, be careful about that. It's always the same. We have pros, we have cons. And everything that is more, let's say, automated, assisted, we need to verify, because we can conceptualize our actions on a scale or an axis from doing the work to doing less work but monitoring the work. We need to do that, because then there is no checking. When you do the work, you oftentimes do not need to verify it, because you verify it as you do it. But if you don't do it, you need to verify it to make sure it's correct, of course. And so what I mean by that is that automatic categorization of themes and insights can be inaccurate. And not only that, it can be too generic. So for instance, user testing could, let's say, tag something as pain point, but it was not exactly a pain point. It depends on the context. And so this is still something that is not perfect, but I think it's getting there, to be honest. So there's that, but also it cannot know for you what you are expecting, at least for now. A huge, big feature, and I'm not sponsored, I'm just telling, if someone from user testing is listening, please, that would be amazing, would be for the platform to know what are your research objectives and to look for data accordingly. And that would be amazing. Because it's basically orational right now. We craft our research objectives and then we look for data that allows us to answer our research questions. But anyway, that's not possible right now, so we need to do the work. So that would be what I wanted to mention for the tools that currently exist when it comes to taking notes. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is the templates part when it comes to note taking. So, as I said, there are several personas who like to take notes different ways. Some people like templates, some people hate them, some people want guidance, and so on and so forth. I will tell you what works for me. For me, it was organizing my thoughts in research objectives, research questions, and then from these research questions, actual user research session questions. And so that allows you to map your research questions to the actual questions you will ask your participants to make sure you are covering all of your research needs, and also to make sure everything you're asking is actually needed. And then when you analyze, you can already prepare your board. That is also important, preparing your board for analysis later. So the more you can bridge the gap between the note-taking and the analysis, the better the analysis will be, because it will be seamless. So think about that. Basically, have a section about the information of the participant, have a section about the research questions, a section about what you observed. So it can be quotes, it can be what the participant took as paths on a screen, for instance, and it can be a section about quotes. Not sure if I said it, but saying it again, just in case. Because in the end, when you will analyze, you will report your information in a very structured way, which will be insights. Okay, what is the evidence for this insight and what is the recommendation? But you need to have this prepared somewhere in a really mapped and efficient way, basically. That's it for today's episode on note taking. I hope you learned at least one thing. As always, if it's the case, please rate the show, subscribe, share it with your friends and colleagues. And I cannot wait to see you in the next episode. But until then, take care. Bye-bye. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you everyone for joining me today on New Exchange. I hope you found today's episode insightful and valuable. Make sure to subscribe in order for you not to miss the next episode. Share it if you liked it and leave a review. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out directly to me. You can find all the details in the show notes. And see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.